The harsh October sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Bitter Creek, Colorado, as rancher Jeremiah "Jerry" Stone rode into town on what he'd expected to be a routine supply run. At 45, Jerry had seen enough of frontier justice to know that small towns could be both sanctuaries and powder kegs, but nothing had prepared him for the scene that greeted him in the town square on this fateful morning in 1887. Crowd of nearly 200 people had gathered around a hastily constructed gallows, their faces showing the ugly excitement that too often accompanied public executions in frontier communities. But what stopped Jerry's heart cold was the sight of 3 young people standing on the platform with nooses around their necks. None of them could have been older than 16, and all bore the gaunt appearance of children who'd known too much hardship and too little food. Jerry dismounted and pushed through the crowd, his military bearing and imposing 6-foot frame allowing him passage through the pressing mass of onlookers. As he got closer to the gallows, he could see that the condemned were indeed children, 2 boys and a girl, all dressed in tattered clothes and showing signs of having lived rough for considerable time. "What's the charge?" Jerry asked a man standing near the front of the crowd. "Trespassing and theft," the man replied with obvious satisfaction. "Caught 'em stealing food from Horace Whitman's general store. Judge Parker says they're old enough to hang for it." Jerry felt rage building in his chest as he studied the 3 young faces on the gallows. The oldest boy, probably 15 or 16, stood with his chin raised defiantly, despite the obvious terror in his eyes. The younger boy, perhaps 13, was crying quietly, while the girl, who couldn't have been more than 14, was staring at the crowd with a mixture of fear and disgust. "Stealing food?" Jerry asked incredulously. "They're going to hang children for stealing food. Law's the law," another spectator replied. "Besides, they ain't from around here. Probably got parents somewhere who should have been watching them." "Better." Jerry pushed closer to the gallows platform, where he could hear the exchange between Judge Silas Parker and the condemned children. "Do any of you have anything to say before sentence is carried out?" Judge Parker asked with the cold formality of a man who'd clearly made his decision long before the trial. The oldest boy stepped forward as much as the rope around his neck would allow. "Your Honor, we never meant to steal. We were just hungry, and we thought maybe Mr. Whitman would let us work for some food. When he wasn't there, we took some bread and jerky, but we left a note saying we'd pay him back when we could." "Theft is theft, regardless of your intentions," Judge Parker replied dismissively. "The law makes no exceptions for hunger or good intentions. This story is about to reveal an incredible act of courage that changed everything. Hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing true stories about heroes who stood up for justice." Jerry had heard enough. As a former cavalry officer who'd spent 15 years fighting to protect innocent people on the frontier, he couldn't stand by and watch children be executed for the crime of trying to survive. But more importantly, as someone who'd spent the last 10 years building a successful ranch through hard work and fair dealing, Jerry understood that communities were judged by how they treated their most vulnerable members. "Judge Parker," Jerry called out, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd, "I demand a word before you proceed with this execution." The judge looked down from the platform with obvious irritation. "Mr. Stone, this is a legal proceeding. If you have business with the court, you can file papers with the clerk." "I have business with you right now," Jerry replied, stepping onto the platform despite the protests of the 2 deputies flanking the judge. "These children are about to be executed for stealing food. Where I come from, we call that murder, not justice." The crowd erupted in angry shouts and calls for Jerry to mind his own business. But Judge Parker raised his hand for silence. "Mr. Stone, you're interfering with a legal execution. These children were given a fair trial and found guilty of theft. The sentence is death, as prescribed by territorial law." "What trial?" Jerry demanded. "When did this supposed trial take place?" "This morning," Judge Parker replied. All legal requirements were satisfied. Jerry felt his blood boiling as he realized that these children had been railroaded through a kangaroo court with no legal representation and no opportunity to present a proper defense. "Judge Parker, these children are orphans, aren't they?" Jerry asked, studying the 3 young faces that showed no recognition of adult protection or advocacy. "That's what they claim," the judge replied. "No family has come forward to vouch for them." "Then, as a citizen of this territory and a veteran of the United States Army, I'm claiming legal guardianship of these children under territorial statutes governing orphaned minors." The crowd erupted again, this time with confusion and outrage at Jerry's unexpected intervention. Judge Parker's face showed surprise mixed with anger at this challenge to his authority. Mr. Stone, you can't simply claim guardianship in the middle of an execution. There are legal procedures. Yes, there are, Jerry interrupted, reaching into his jacket pocket. And those procedures include the right of any citizen to assume temporary guardianship of orphaned children when their welfare is threatened by legal proceedings. Jerry pulled out a folded document that he'd carried for 10 years but never expected to use in circumstances like these. Judge Parker, I'm invoking my authority under this commission from Governor Benjamin Harrison to intervene in cases where territorial law is being misapplied to the detriment of innocent people. The document Jerry held was a special commission he'd received after his military service, authorizing him to act as a territorial agent in remote areas where regular legal authority was unavailable or compromised. It was a relic from his days as a cavalry officer, but it carried the full weight of territorial and federal law. Judge Parker took the document and read it carefully, his expression shifting from confidence to uncertainty as he realized the legal implications of Jerry's intervention. Mr. Stone, this commission gives you authority to investigate legal irregularities, but it doesn't give you the right to interfere with judicial proceedings. Actually, it does, Jerry replied, having memorized every word of the commissioned years. Earlier, Section 12 specifically authorizes intervention when territorial citizens are being denied due process or when legal proceedings appear to violate federal constitutional protections. Jerry turned to address the 3 children directly. What are your names? The oldest boy answered for the group. I'm Michael O'Brien, sir. This is my brother Patrick, and this is our friend Sarah Walsh. We've been traveling together since the orphanage in Denver closed down 6 months ago. How long since you've had a proper meal? 3 days, sir, Michael replied. We've been walking for a week, trying to find work or someone who might help us. Jerry turned back to Judge Parker, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. Judge Parker, these children are guilty of nothing more than trying to survive. They're orphans with no resources, no legal representation, and no adult advocacy. Executing them for stealing food would be a violation of every principle of justice this territory was founded on. Mr. Stone, sentiment doesn't change the law, neither does prejudice against homeless children. Jerry interrupted. Judge Parker, I'm formally requesting a postponement of this execution, pending a proper legal review of the case and the appointment of adequate legal counsel for these defendants. The crowd was growing increasingly agitated, with some people calling for Jerry to be arrested and others beginning to question whether hanging children for stealing food was really the kind of justice they wanted in their community. Furthermore, Jerry continued, I'm exercising my authority under this commission to take temporary custody of these children pending resolution of their legal situation. Judge Parker looked at the document again, clearly trying to find legal grounds to reject Jerry's intervention. But the commission was legitimate, and Jerry's knowledge of territorial law was obviously extensive. Mr. Stone, even if I grant this postponement, these children will still have to face trial for theft. That's fine, Jerry replied. But they'll face it with proper legal representation and adequate time to prepare a defense. And they'll face it as wards of a legal guardian who can vouch for their character and circumstances. As Jerry stood on the gallows platform, facing down a hostile crowd and a corrupt judge, he understood that he was fighting for more than just 3 young lives. He was fighting for the principle that justice should protect the innocent and vulnerable, not prey upon them. What Jerry didn't know was that his intervention would set in motion a series of events that would not only save 3 orphans from an unjust death, but would also expose a web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. The governor's investigation, the postponement of the execution created chaos in Bitter Creek, with the crowd dispersing in angry confusion, while Jerry assumed temporary custody of Michael, Patrick, and Sarah. Judge Parker had reluctantly agreed to delay the hanging for 72 hours while Jerry's commission was verified through official channels, but the judge made it clear that he expected the execution to proceed once the legal technicalities were resolved. Jerry took the 3 orphans to the boarding house run by Martha Winters, one of the few people in town who showed any sympathy for their situation. Martha was a widow in her 60s who'd raised 5 children of her own and understood the difference between criminal behavior and desperate survival. Mr. Stone, Martha said, as she prepared hot meals for the 3 half-starved children, what you did today took more courage than most people in this town will ever possess, but you've made some powerful enemies. I've made enemies before, Jerry replied, watching Michael, Patrick, and Sarah eat their first proper meal in days. What matters now is making sure these children get fair treatment under the law. That evening, Jerry sat down with the 3 orphans to learn their full story and assess what kind of legal defense might be possible. "Michael," Jerry said, "tell me about this orphanage in Denver and how you ended up traveling together." Michael, who was clearly the leader of the small group, explained that they'd been residents of the St. Joseph's Home for Children until budget cuts forced the institution to close. Most of the children had been transferred to other facilities, but Michael, Patrick, and Sarah had run away rather than be separated from each other. "Patrick's my only blood family," Michael explained, "and Sarah's been like a sister to us since her parents died in a mine accident 3 years ago. The new orphanages wanted to split us up, send Patrick to a boys' home in Kansas and Sarah to a girls' school in New Mexico. We couldn't let that happen." "So, you've been traveling together for 6 months?" Jerry asked. "Yes, sir," Sarah answered. "We've been looking for work, trying to find someone who might take all 3 of us in. We've worked for meals at some ranches, helped with harvests, done whatever we could to earn our keep." Jerry was impressed by their resourcefulness and their loyalty to each other. But he was also beginning to understand the full scope of the challenges they faced. "What about relatives? Do any of you have family who might take you in?" "No, sir," Michael replied. "Our parents came from Ireland, but we don't know anyone there. Sarah's folks were from back east somewhere, but she doesn't remember much about them." Jerry spent the next hour learning about their journey across Colorado, their desperate search for work and shelter, and their growing hunger as winter approached. Their story was heartbreaking, but unfortunately, thousands of children had been orphaned by mining accidents, disease, and frontier violence, and most communities lacked adequate resources to care for them. "Mr. Stone," Sarah said quietly, "are they really going to hang us for taking that food?" "Not if I can help it," Jerry replied firmly. "But I need to understand exactly what happened at Whitman's store." The children's account of the incident was exactly what Jerry had suspected. They'd approached Horace Whitman's general store, hoping to work for food, found it temporarily unattended, and had taken some basic supplies, while leaving a note promising repayment. It was desperation, not criminal intent, that had driven their actions. The next morning, Jerry received news that would change the entire complexion of the case. A telegram arrived from the territorial capital, informing him that Governor Benjamin Harrison himself was dispatching an investigator to review the situation in Bitter Creek. "Mr. Stone," the telegraph operator, William Barnes, said as he delivered the message, "this telegram is from the governor's office. Says they're sending someone to investigate irregularities in legal proceedings in this town." Jerry read the telegram with growing satisfaction. "To Mr. Jeremiah Stone, Stop Governor Harrison has received report of your intervention in Bitter Creek legal proceedings. Stop Territorial Attorney General Marcus Wells en route to investigate. Stop maintain custody of minors pending full review. Stop your commission authority confirmed and supported. Stop Governor Harrison." The arrival of the telegram created immediate tension in the town, as word spread that territorial officials were coming to investigate Judge Parker's handling of the case. Jerry could see the concern on the faces of the town's leading citizens, many of whom had enthusiastically supported the rushed execution. That afternoon, Jerry received an unexpected visitor at the boarding house. Horace Whitman, the store owner, whose complaint had started the entire legal proceedings. "Mr. Stone," Whitman said, his manner nervous and apologetic, "I need to speak with you about this situation with those children." "What about it, Mr. Whitman?" "Well, the truth is, I never asked for them to be arrested," Whitman admitted. "When I found my store had been entered and some food taken, I reported it to Marshal Davies. But I also found their note promising to pay me back, and I told the marshal that it seemed like desperate children, not hardened criminals." Jerry felt a chill as he realized the implications of Whitman's admission. "Mr. Whitman, are you saying that Marshal Davies and Judge Parker proceeded with the arrest and trial, despite your willingness to show leniency?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Whitman replied. "Marshal Davies told me that the law was the law, and that making exceptions would encourage more theft. Judge Parker said that swift justice was necessary to maintain order." "Mr. Whitman, would you be willing to testify to these facts when the territorial investigator arrives?" "Yes, sir, I would," Whitman said firmly. "I've got children of my own, and I can't live with the idea that 3 youngsters might hang because of my complaint, when I never wanted it to go that far." The next day brought the arrival of Territorial Attorney General Marcus Wells, a distinguished man in his 50s, who'd built a reputation for thoroughness and integrity in his investigations of frontier legal practices. Wells immediately requested meetings with all parties involved in the case, starting with Jerry and the three orphans. Mr. Stone, Wells said as they met in Martha Winter's parlor. Your intervention in this case has raised serious questions about legal procedures in Bitter Creek. I need to understand exactly what you observed and what actions you took. Jerry provided a detailed account of the attempted execution, his use of the Territorial Commission, and his assumption of guardianship over the orphans. Wells listened carefully, taking extensive notes and asking pointed questions about the timeline of events. Mr. Stone, in your opinion, were these children provided with adequate legal representation? They had no representation at all, Jerry replied. They were arrested, tried, and sentenced to death within a matter of hours, with no opportunity to present a defense or even understand the charges against them. Wells then interviewed Michael, Patrick, and Sarah, his manner gentle but thorough as he assessed their maturity, their understanding of events, and their account of the incident at Whitman's store. Sarah, Wells asked, when you took the food from Mr. Whitman's store, did you understand that what you were doing was against the law? Yes, sir, Sarah replied honestly. But we were so hungry, and we thought maybe if we left a note explaining why we took it and promising to pay it back, it wouldn't be as bad as just stealing. Did anyone explain to you during your trial that you had the right to an attorney or that you could present evidence in your defense? No, sir, Michael answered. Judge Parker just asked if we took the food, and when we said yes, he said we were guilty and would hang for it. Wells' investigation continued for 3 days, during which he interviewed Judge Parker, Marshal Davies, and numerous townspeople who had witnessed the proceedings. What emerged was a pattern of legal shortcuts and constitutional violations that painted a damning picture of frontier justice gone wrong. On the 4th day, Wells called a public meeting in the town hall to announce his findings and recommend. The hall was packed with curious and concerned citizens, many of whom were beginning to realize that their community's reputation was at stake. Citizens of Bitter Creek, Wells began, I have completed my investigation into the legal proceedings against the 3 orphaned minors currently in Mr. Stone's custody. My findings are deeply troubling. Wells went on to detail a litany of legal violations. The children had been denied legal representation. The trial had been conducted without proper notice or adequate time for preparation, and the sentence had been grossly disproportionate to the alleged crime. Furthermore, Wells continued, my investigation has revealed that the complainant, Mr. Whitman, never requested prosecution to the full extent of the law and had indicated his willingness to resolve the matter through restitution rather than criminal penalties. The crowd stirred uneasily as the implications of Wells' findings became clear. Based on these findings, I am recommending to Governor Harrison that all charges against these children be dismissed, and that this case be used as an example of the importance of proper legal procedures in territorial courts. But Wells wasn't finished. His investigation had uncovered evidence of a broader pattern of legal corruption that would shake the foundations of Bitter Creek's power structure. Corruption exposed. Wells' investigation into the orphans' case had revealed corruption that extended far beyond a single instance of rushed justice. Over the following week, as he continued to examine court records and interview witnesses, a pattern emerged that painted Judge Parker and Marshal Davies as part of a systematic abuse of legal authority. Mr. Stone, Wells said, during a private meeting at the boarding house, what I've discovered goes far beyond the case of these 3 children. Judge Parker has been conducting what amounts to kangaroo courts for over 2 years, with Marshal Davies providing arrests on demand. Jerry wasn't surprised by the revelation, but the scope of the corruption was staggering. What kind of cases? Property disputes where Parker consistently rules in favor of certain wealthy landowners. Vagrancy charges against people whose only crime is being poor. And theft charges that seem designed to clear undesirable people out of the community, Wells explained. The pattern suggests a deliberate effort to use legal proceedings as tools of social control. Wells showed Jerry a ledger he'd obtained from the court clerk's office, documenting dozens of cases where similar shortcuts had been taken. Many involved transients, orphans, or other vulnerable people who lacked the resources to mount proper legal defenses. Mr. Stone, I believe Judge Parker was planning to use your 3 orphans as an example of public execution designed to discourage other undesirables from entering Bitter Creek. The investigation had also revealed financial irregularities that suggested Judge Parker and Marshal Davies were being compensated beyond their official salaries. Wells had traced payments from several wealthy landowners to accounts controlled by the 2 officials, indicating a system of legal corruption that had been operating for years. The good news, Wells continued, is that I have enough evidence to recommend criminal charges against both Parker and Davies. The bad news is that their corruption has affected dozens of cases, many involving people who were already executed or imprisoned. Jerry felt sick as he contemplated the scope of the injustice that had been perpetrated in the name of law and order. What about the 3 children? Are they safe now? Completely safe, Wells assured him. All charges have been dismissed, and Governor Harrison has personally intervened to ensure they're protected. But Mr. Stone, there's something else I need to discuss with you. Wells explained that the territorial government was concerned about the broader implications of the Bitter Creek corruption case. If similar abuses were occurring in other remote communities, the territory's reputation and eligibility for statehood could be compromised. Governor Harrison has asked me to offer you a permanent position as a territorial inspector, with authority to investigate legal irregularities throughout Colorado Territory. Your military background and your demonstrated commitment to justice make you an ideal candidate. Jerry was honored by the offer, but he was also concerned about the 3 orphans who had become his responsibility. Mr. Wells, what about Michael, Patrick, and Sarah? I've assumed guardianship of them, and I can't abandon them now. That's exactly why the governor wants you for this position, Wells replied. Your willingness to risk your own safety to protect those children proves that you understand what justice really means. As for the children, the territorial government is prepared to provide financial support for their care and education. Over the next few days, as Wells prepared his final report and arranged for the arrest of Judge Parker and Marshal Davies, Jerry found himself in the unexpected position of planning a future that included not only the 3 orphans, but also a career dedicated to ensuring that justice was fairly administered throughout the territory. Mr. Stone, Michael said one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch. Mrs. Winters says you might become some kind of traveling judge, making sure people get fair trials. Something like that, Jerry replied. But more importantly, I want to make sure that what happened to you 3 never happens to other children. What's going to happen to us? Sarah asked quietly. We don't want to be separated, and we don't want to be sent away to different orphanages. Jerry had been wrestling with this question since assuming guardianship of the children. His ranch was large enough to support them, and he'd grown genuinely fond of all 3. But raising 3 orphan children while traveling throughout the territory as an inspector would present significant challenges. What would you think about coming to live at my ranch permanently? Jerry asked. You'd have a home, you'd stay together, and you'd have opportunities for education and meaningful work. The children's faces lit up with hope and excitement at the possibility of a permanent home together. You mean we could be like a real family? Patrick asked. We could be a real family, Jerry replied. Not just like one. The resolution of the orphans case became a territorial sensation, with newspapers throughout Colorado reporting on the corruption exposed in Bitter Creek and the dramatic rescue of 3 children from an unjust execution. Governor Harrison used the case as an example of the territory's commitment to legal reform and equal justice. But the most significant outcome was the personal transformation experienced by Jerry Stone, who discovered that his greatest satisfaction came not from his successful ranch or his military honors, but from the simple act of protecting 3 vulnerable children who had no one else to advocate for them. 6 months later, Jerry officially adopted Michael, Patrick, and Sarah, giving them not only legal security, but also the family bonds they'd been seeking since becoming orphans. His ranch became a haven for other homeless children as well, with Jerry using his position as territorial inspector to identify and assist youngsters in similar situations. Mr. Stone, Sarah said one evening, as the family gathered for dinner at the ranch, do you ever regret getting involved in our situation? Your life was probably a lot simpler before you met us. Sarah, Jerry replied, looking around the table at the 3 young people who had become his children. Saving your lives was the most important thing I've ever done. Everything else was just preparation for becoming your father. The story of Jerry Stone and the 3 orphans became legendary throughout Colorado Territory, inspiring legal reforms that strengthened protections for vulnerable defendants and established standards for due process in frontier courts. But more importantly, it demonstrated that individual courage could triumph over institutional corruption, and that families could be created through choice and commitment, as well as birth. Building a legacy 2 years after the dramatic events in Bitter Creek, Jerry Stone had established himself as one of the most respected territorial inspectors in Colorado, traveling throughout the region to investigate legal irregularities and ensure that justice was fairly administered in remote communities. His reputation for integrity and his dramatic rescue of 3 orphans from an unjust execution had made him a legendary figure on the frontier. But the most significant changes had occurred at the Stone Ranch, which had been transformed from a solitary man's retreat into a thriving family operation. Michael, now 18, had developed into an accomplished horseman and ranch manager. Patrick, 16, showed exceptional talent with livestock and was studying veterinary medicine through correspondence courses. Sarah, 15, had become the family's scholar, devouring every book Jerry could obtain and expressing ambitions to become a teacher. Jerry, Martha Winters said during one of her regular visits to the ranch, "Those children have blossomed under your care in ways that would make their original parents proud. They've taught me as much as I've taught them," Jerry replied, watching Michael work with a young horse in the corral. "I thought I knew what family meant, but they showed me that love is more important than blood." Jerry's work as a territorial inspector had taken him to dozens of communities throughout Colorado, where he'd investigated cases involving legal corruption, inadequate representation, and abuse of authority. His commission from Governor Harrison had been expanded several times, giving him broader authority to intervene in cases where constitutional rights were being violated. But Jerry never traveled alone on these investigations. Michael, Patrick, and Sarah often accompanied him, both for their education and because their presence reminded communities that justice should protect the vulnerable rather than prey upon them. The children serve as living proof of what can happen when legal systems work properly, Jerry explained to a gathering of territorial officials in Denver. They're also powerful advocates for legal reform because they've experienced firsthand what happens when justice fails. One of Jerry's most significant cases involved a mining town called Silver Ridge, where company officials had been using legal proceedings to evict homesteaders whose land contained valuable ore deposits. The situation was similar to Bitter Creek, in that wealthy interests were manipulating legal processes to serve their own purposes. "Mr. Stone," said Alina Martinez, one of the homesteaders facing eviction, "they're using the same tactics you exposed in Bitter Creek rush trials: inadequate representation and predetermined outcomes." Jerry's investigation revealed a pattern of corruption involving the local judge, the sheriff, and mining company officials. But this time, he had the experience and authority to intervene more effectively than he had in Bitter Creek. "The difference, now," Jerry explained to Sarah as they reviewed court documents together, "is that we understand how these systems work and how to use legal procedures to protect people's rights." The Silver Ridge case resulted in the removal of corrupt officials and the establishment of new legal protections for homesteaders throughout the territory. But more importantly, it demonstrated that the reforms inspired by the Bitter Creek case were having broader impact on frontier justice. As Jerry's reputation grew, he began receiving requests for assistance from communities throughout the West. Territorial officials in Wyoming, Montana, and New Mexico sought his expertise in investigating legal irregularities and establishing proper judicial procedures. Michael said during one of their evening conversations, "You've become famous for helping people get fair treatment under the law, but what you did for us was just as important as any of your official investigations." "More important," Jerry replied. "All the legal reforms in the world don't mean anything if we don't care enough to protect individual people when they need help." Sarah had been documenting their experiences in a detailed journal that would eventually become a book about frontier justice and legal reform. Her writing captured not only the dramatic events surrounding their rescue, but also the everyday challenges of building a family from the bonds of choice rather than blood. "Jerry," Sarah said one evening, as she worked on her manuscript, "I want to dedicate this book to all the children who don't have someone like you to rescue them when the system fails." "That's a good dedication," Jerry replied. "But remember that the real heroes in our story are the people who chose to do the right thing when doing right was difficult, people like Horace Whitman and Martha Winters, who stood up for you when it mattered." By 1890, Colorado had achieved statehood, and the legal reforms inspired by the Bitter Creek case had been incorporated into the new state's constitution. Jerry was offered a position as a state circuit judge, which would have allowed him to settle permanently at his ranch while still contributing to the administration of justice. "What do you think?" Jerry asked his children as they discussed the opportunity. "Are you ready to have a father who's a judge instead of a traveling inspector?" "We're ready for whatever makes you happy," Patrick replied. "But we're also proud that our family story helped change the legal system for other people." Jerry accepted the judgeship and spent the next 15 years ensuring that Colorado's courts provided fair treatment to all citizens, regardless of their wealth, status, or background. He became particularly known for his compassionate handling of cases involving children and his insistence that legal proceedings serve justice rather than convenience. Michael eventually took over management of the ranch and married a local teacher named Rebecca Walsh. Patrick became a veterinarian and established a practice that served ranchers throughout the region. Sarah became the first woman admitted to the Colorado bar and dedicated her legal career to representing orphans and other vulnerable people. On Jerry's 60th birthday, the 3 children he'd rescued from the gallows organized a celebration that brought together hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by his commitment to justice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said as she addressed the gathering, 23 years ago, a man we'd never met risked his reputation and his safety to save 3 orphans from an unjust execution. He didn't do it because we were special or because he expected anything in return. He did it because he believed that justice should protect the innocent. But what Jerry Stone gave us was more than just our lives, Michael continued. He gave us a family, an education, and the opportunity to build meaningful lives. Most importantly, he taught us that family isn't about blood relations, it's about people who choose to love and support each other. And he taught us, Patrick added, that one person's courage can change an entire legal system, when that courage is applied at the right moment, in the right way. As Jerry looked around at the gathering of family, friends, and colleagues who had come to honor his contributions to justice, he reflected on the strange turns his life had taken since that October day when he'd ridden into Bitter Creek, expecting nothing more than a routine supply run. 3 children facing execution for the crime of being hungry had become his greatest teachers, showing him that the most important battles were fought not on distant battlefields but in the daily struggle to protect the innocent and vulnerable from those who would exploit them. "My friends," Jerry said as he addressed the gathering, "if I've accomplished anything worthwhile in my life, it's because 3 remarkable young people taught me that love is stronger than law, that family is more than blood, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves." If this incredible story about courage, justice, and the power of chosen family moved you, smash that like button and subscribe for more amazing true stories about heroes who stood up for what's right when it mattered most. Share this video with someone who believes that one person's courage can change the world. Comment below and tell us, would you risk everything to save innocent strangers from injustice? Ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest inspiring stories. Remember, sometimes the most important families are the ones we choose to create. This remarkable story reminds us that justice is not automatic. It requires brave individuals willing to risk their own comfort and safety to protect the innocent. Jerry Stone's intervention on behalf of 3 orphans demonstrates that legal systems are only as strong as the people who refuse to let them be corrupted by prejudice, convenience, or personal interest. The transformation of 3 desperate children into accomplished adults proves that what people need most is not charity, but opportunity and belief in their potential. Jerry's willingness to see past their circumstances to their character created a family bond that was stronger than blood, and a legacy that extended far beyond his own lifetime. Their story continues to inspire legal reforms and child welfare initiatives throughout the American West, proving that individual acts of courage can create systemic change when they're grounded in unwavering commitment to justice and human dignity. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is refuse to let injustice proceed in our name, even when stopping it requires everything we have to give.